story takes place when I was 14 female, now 23. It was late summer, and I was coming home from hanging out at the beach for my best friend Mia's 17th birthday party. When I got off the subway at my stop, I looked at the bus arrival screen. The bus I would normally take home was arriving in an hour. Being a tired 14-year-old girl, I decided to take an alternate bus route home. This was a decision I would later regret. When I got off the bus at my stop, I have about a 10-minute walk to my building. My area at night is pretty quiet, not many cars on the streets. As I'm walking up the street, I hear the sound of an engine nearby. I look over my left shoulder, and I see a white panel van. I know, how typical, rolling up the street. I tried to think nothing of it, but when I turn onto my street, the van does too. I'm now unsettled and start walking faster. This van is driving slowly and never passes me. When I turn up the long driveway to my building, the van once again turns too. Now I'm scared. The driveway to my building has an ice rink on the side of it with bright lights, so I walk beside the rink under the bright lights. The van catches up to me and stops. So I think maybe this person is lost and trying to ask for directions. I was trying to find some way to rationalize this. I stop, stay about 4 feet from the van just in case. I look in the van window to see an older man starting to bald with black hair and a white t-shirt. I ask if they're lost. They don't respond. Instead, they try to get me into their van. I say no and start walking, but the van continues to drive slowly following me. When a red car begins to drive down the driveway, the van drives all the way to the end of the driveway and waits for the red car to turn before reversing to be beside me again. The man is still trying to get me in the van. I want to make a mad dash for my building, but I'm worried he'll see where I live, so I keep walking. When another car comes down the driveway, the van does what it did before, drive to the end and wait for the car to leave. But this time, there's a cab dropping someone off at the townhouses. The cabbie is closing his trunk when he sees me. "Are you okay?" he asks. I tell him how the van has been following me, and every time a car comes, the van drives to the end and waits for it to leave before following me again. The cabbie tells me he'll get in his car, drive to the end of the driveway, and sit there for a bit so I have enough time to run to my building. I tell him okay and thank you. The van is back in line with me again, so the cabbie gets in his cab and drives up the driveway. The van follows. I look and see the 2 vehicles sitting there. I run up the rest of the driveway into my building's lobby. My heart is racing. When I get to my apartment, I'm still freaked out. I go to my room and call the cops. While I'm on the phone with the cops, I look out my bedroom window and see the van. It's slowly driving around my building looking for me. Now I'm fully panicking. The cops send officers to sweep the area, but they don't find him. 2 officers came to my apartment to get a statement from me. About a week after this happened, the officers come back to my apartment. They show me a photo of the man from the van that they were able to get from the security camera on the side of my building. I told them that the man in the photo was the one that followed me. They told me that they found him and that he was being put on the sex offender list. So to the man in the white panel van, let's not meet. I was 12 to 13 at the time, but I developed early. I was staying the night at my friend Rose's house, and her mom left us to care for her little sister while she went out for a few hours. Being the good babysitters we were, we decided to head over to a local park with a playground to just hang out for a while and let her sister play. We'd been there about 30 minutes, and were just hanging out pushing her little sister on the swings, when 2 guys showed up and sat at a picnic table close to the playground. The first guy looked to be in his late teens, probably 5'10", short brown hair, brown eyes, and a medium build. But the other guy had to be in his early 30s. He was a very large guy, at probably 6'1", 250 pounds, and had a full beard, shoulder-length curly brown hair, and green eyes. We noticed when they sat down, but didn't really even give them a second thought, as apart from their obvious age and physical appearance differences, There was nothing that really stood out about them, till Chris, the older guy, decided to start a conversation with us. At first, he just asked us our names, gave us theirs, and asked what we were up to today. Still being the polite kid I was raised to be, I answered him, but kept my answers short and continued playing with Rosa and her sister on the swings. He kept asking questions like where we were headed later and whether we wanted to hang out with him and his nephew, the younger guy, whose name I don't remember, all while getting closer and closer to us as he was talking. We told him we were just going to go home after Rosa's sister was done playing, and we weren't allowed to go anywhere else. He then offered me some sort of beer that he had with him and asked me if I smoked. I had never drank any kind of alcohol at this point, and I wasn't about to start then, so I declined his offer. He then told me how pretty I was and asked me if I had a boyfriend, and without skipping a beat, told me that he had recently just gotten out of jail and was looking for a girlfriend. I told him I didn't have a boyfriend, and I wasn't interested in having one either. During this whole interaction, he would occasionally address his attention to his nephew, and from the conversations they had, I quickly caught on that they were in a gang, which is when I actually started getting nervous, as even I knew that you couldn't mess with people in the local gangs, and knew we had to be careful about what we said and did. He was quiet for a bit after that, and I figured they were going to move on and go bug someone else, but I was wrong. He asked me again what we were going to do later, and whether we wanted to go hang out with them, telling us how much fun we could have, and how they could buy us beer, or whatever we wanted. I told him again that we couldn't go anywhere, and we had to watch Rose's little sister, and he went quiet again. I know we should have just picked up and left right then, but I had just really started getting into my rebellious stage, and thought we could handle these guys no problem, and they weren't really a threat. We weren't ready to go back to Rose's house yet, so we went and sat at another picnic table, thinking that if we ignored them, they'd get the hints and go away. Of course not. 1 minute later, Chris and his nephew came and sat with us. His nephew stayed at one end of the table, but Chris decided to come sit right next to me and start telling me again how pretty I was and how he could be my boyfriend, and we should just go hang out at his place or wherever I wanted to go. At this point, his nephew started looking kind of nervous. He was very casually chatting with Rosa, but I could tell he realized how young we were, and that his uncle was really starting to cross the line. He told me he thought that they should go do something else, because Rosa and I couldn't go anywhere, but Chris wasn't having any of that. I don't remember what he said next, as he was still sitting next to me, but the next thing I know, he put his arm around my shoulders and pulled me into his side. I was completely caught off guard and didn't even know how to react. I'd never had an older guy that close to me, let alone touch me like that, and I had actually grown up quite sheltered. I know I should have at least pushed him away or done something, but I froze. He kept saying again and again how he could be my boyfriend, and he would take good care of me, asking me if I could go somewhere with him. I told him no, and started trying to slowly get out from under his arm without making a big deal of it. At that moment, I started getting scared, as he was getting pretty pushy, and I really didn't want to piss him off, as it was just us in the park, and I couldn't hear or see anyone else around. He wasn't having that, though. He pulled me closer to him again, and this time, he kissed me. It wasn't just a quick little peck. It was a forceful, lingering kiss that completely threw me off. My mind just started racing. I couldn't believe what had just happened. And even Rosa was just sitting there with a look of complete shock on her face. I decided I had enough of this, and we needed to get out of there. I pulled away one last time, and he told me again we should go somewhere to have some fun. He wasn't very creative, and just kept saying the same things over and over again, just wording them slightly different. It was now very obvious what he had on his mind. I told him that it was getting late, and we had to get Rose's little sister home, as her mom was going to be home soon. He didn't seem very happy with hearing that, so I told him that maybe we could take her little sister home, but maybe we could come back and hang out with them some more. Finally, I guess he either believed me or decided to let me get up, so I grabbed Rose's little sister to carry her home. I just turned around and was getting ready to tell Rosa that we had to leave now, and suddenly he seemed to have changed his mind, stood up, and came over to me. I just put Rose's little sister down for a moment, as she was getting kind of heavy for me, and I knew we had a ways to walk, so I wanted to give my arms a break for a second. He took that opportunity to grab me from behind and pull me into him, kind of like a bear hug with his whole body pressed up against mine. A whole flood of emotions ran through me at that moment. Fear, confusion, and still a bit of denial that he really would do something to hurt me. But I knew it was wrong either way and needed to get away from him. I was still in a kind of state of shock at this time, but knew I had to keep my wits about me. I decided to play along like I liked him and try to work out a way for him to let us leave without making him mad or think I was lying to him. I told him again that we had to go, that Rose's mom would get mad and come looking for us, but I promised him that we would just drop her sister off and come back. I told him again, as convincingly as I could, that we had to take Rose's sister back home, and I promised him that we would come back and told him to just wait for us there. He seemed to have bought it, so we quickly started walking back to Rose's house, while he and his nephew were now sat at the table. As we started walking, I glanced back and saw his nephew trying to get him to leave again. So I thought, great, they're leaving, so there's no way they're going to see where we are, follow us. Wrong. Just as I thought they were leaving in the opposite direction, Chris decided to follow us. We had a bit of a head start, but he was a really big guy and was gaining on us quickly. We hurried as fast as we could because we didn't want him to see where she lived. So once we got on her street, we took off running. We finally got back to Rose's apartment and thought we were in the clear. I could hear Chris calling me, but I couldn't see him, so I thought they couldn't see us. So we went inside as quickly and as quietly as we could. Once inside, we went over to the window and could still hear Chris calling my name and getting really close. So we decided to stay quiet and carefully watch from the window to see if they had seen where we went. Luckily, they kept on walking right past Rose's apartment. We both breathed a huge sigh of relief and then started freaking out because neither of us had ever had anything like this happen before, but we were so glad it was over and we were in the clear. Shortly after that, Rose's mom got home and we went out to meet her in the parking area. Neither of us had any intentions of telling her what had happened, as Rose's mom wasn't the nicest, and we were sure we would get in trouble even though we hadn't done anything wrong. We all got back upstairs and were chatting with Rose's mom and little brother, and then we heard a knock at the door. My heart stopped as I could swear I heard Chris's voice on the other side of the door. We both went back in the kitchen as Rose's mom went to answer the door. It was Chris and his nephew again. Somehow they must have seen us when we went out to meet her mom and seen which apartment we went into. They asked Rose's mom if we were there, but luckily we were smart enough to give them fake names. And even then, Rose's mom was having none of that. Told them to get the hell out of there and slammed the door in their face. Of course, Rose's mom knew something was up and asked us if we knew them, but we weren't about to admit what we did, so we just told her we had no idea what was going on or who they were. I don't think she really bought it, but she left it at that and just told us not to answer the door. Later that evening, her mom was going out again, but this time we didn't have to watch her little sister, so it was just Rosa and I in the apartment. We were just hanging out in the living room, talking about how crazy that afternoon turned out to be, and how glad we were that we didn't get into trouble. And then we hear it. 2 voices that sound very familiar just outside of the window. I was terrified to even move, and then came the knock at the door. There was no way we were answering it, so we just kept as quiet as possible and prayed they'd go away. They called out our names and tried knocking again, and then one of them tried turning the doorknob. Thankfully, Rose's mom had locked it on her way out. They tried knocking one more time, and then all you could hear is their footsteps walking away from the door. We never saw either of them again. We didn't go back to that park again for quite some time. It was an incredibly surreal experience. However, I will never forget his face, the feel of his body against mine, or that he tasted like cigarettes and beer. I grew up in Australia. When I was in high school, I used to get the bus home from school every day. The bus stop was about a 10-minute walk from my house. I did this walk every afternoon by myself. It was always quiet. I remember this day vividly. It was 2009, and I was 13 or 14 years old. Can't remember what time of the year this happened, but I was in year 8, in high school. I got off the bus, and there was this tall, dark-haired man wearing a gray trench coat. I think he was also wearing makeup, standing at the bus stop when I got off. I thought to myself that he looked creepy, and it was strange. I'd never seen him before. He smiled at me, and I put my music on through my earbuds and began walking home like any other day. When I walked down the alleyway to my street, I started to get this weird sense like something was wrong. I turned my music down and could hear loud footsteps behind me. I was too scared to turn around, so I started walking faster. I finally turned around. It was the creepy dark-haired man from the bus stop. I felt my stomach drop. He was about 5 meters behind me and yelled something out to me, but I couldn't understand it. He either yelled, "I'm gonna rip you," or "I'm gonna rip you," really loudly. I sprinted home in shock and didn't turn back. The song playing through my earbuds while I was running home was Ready or Not by the Fugees. I'm 25 years old now, and this has always haunted me.